So Matthew chapter 26, verses 6 to 13. I've just opened it, I'm just going to read from the screen. While Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. "Why this waste?" they asked. "This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor." Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her."
In the Journey to the Cross series, we are looking at the town of Bethany today. I've really enjoyed studying Bethany, both from a geography and a biblical point of view. And I've learned some really interesting things. Bethany was the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. It was where Lazarus was buried and where Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. It was also the home of Simon the leper. Jesus visited there on a number of occasions. The start of his triumphal journey into Jerusalem was from Bethany. And it was also at Bethany that he ascended into heaven 40 days after his resurrection. John 11 verse 18 says that Bethany is about 2 miles or 3 kilometers east of Jerusalem. And in Acts 1 verse 12, it describes it as a Sabbath day's journey, which is the distance that a person was permitted to walk on a Sabbath day. It is at the foot of the Mount of Olives, and it's on the old route between Jerusalem and Jericho. To us in Australia, it's probably easier to see Bethany as almost more of a suburb to Jerusalem than a separate town. There is a bit of a dispute about what the name Bethany means. Some say the name Bethany means house of figs, as there were many fig trees and palms in the area. But others translate it as house of misery, and it's speculated that Bethany was a designated place for the sick and for those isolating with diseases. This speculation is backed up by a temple scroll, which was found as part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. This temple scroll does not form part of our Bible, but it goes into more detail about Israel's temple, sacrifices, festivals, and holiness and purity rituals. It talks about setting up 3 places for the care of the sick, including one for lepers. They were to be east of Jerusalem. The passage also defines a minimum radius of about 3,000 cubits around the city, within which nothing unclean shall be seen. Bethany is out of view of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, because the peak of the Mount of Olives is between. It also fits the criteria for the minimum distance from the city. It matches the requirements, so it makes sense that this was a place to care for the sick. This would make sense as Bethany is constantly referred to in the Bible as poor, and the story of the alabaster jar, which we'll look at in more detail shortly, implies a special connection between Bethany and the care for the poor. Bethany doesn't exist nowadays. The area where Bethany used to be is now called Al-Azariah, which is an Arabic name. Al-Azariah means place of Lazarus, and it was built up around the tomb of Lazarus. The tomb of Lazarus has been recognized as such from the 3rd century, and it's open to the public. It's a popular place of pilgrimage. Al-Azariah may not match up 100% with the historical village of Bethany, but if not, then it's somewhere in the close vicinity. Nowadays, Al-Azariah is in West Bank and it's under Palestinian control. Just about there. In 2002, Israel built a dividing wall which separates Al-Azariah from the rest of Jerusalem. This separation wall was built on a different alignment to what is internationally recognized as the Israeli-Palestinian border. So the internationally recognised border is this green line here, and the separation wall was built on this red squiggly line there. And I've got photos of the wall. Before the construction of this wall, Palestinians were able to move freely between West Bank and Jerusalem. Israel formally forbade Palestinians from entering Jerusalem in 1993, but this was not strictly enforced until after the construction of the wall. In the process of the wall being built, there was Palestinian land that was lost and confiscated, and it also affected trade, supplies, and jobs. This has generally made the people in Al-Azariah poorer. I've just got some pictures on the screen there of what the town looks like now. So why does this all matter? What relevance does it have to me? Perhaps in a sermon series called Journey to the Cross, what happens after the cross isn't relevant. But there is a prophecy in Zechariah 14 which states that when Jesus returns again, he will physically appear on the Mount of Olives to the east of Jerusalem. So it appears that this area still has a significant role to play in our futures. Enough about geography though. I want to look more closely now at the story of the alabaster jar, which was set in Bethany. So keep in mind that Bethany was likely a town set up for the care of the sick and was a very poor area. All right, so starting from verse 6. While Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. Considering the setting for this story, you can see how extravagant this action was. In a parallel account of this story in John, it states that the alabaster jar was worth over a year's wages. I was trying to think how I can put that into perspective for us now, and I reckon it's similar to the value of a new car. People have also suggested that this alabaster jar was like an inheritance, a gift that a young woman would be given when she came of age, a gift that she would then give to her husband as a sign of her commitment and devotion. This was not something that was replaceable. Verse 8, when the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. They were likely surrounded by poor people that they were trying their best to care for. I think from a human point of view, this response seems understandable. Verse 10. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me." Jesus accepts this offering. This woman was acting out of her intense love and devotion to Jesus. This was her act of worship. Who are we to question? Verse 12, which is still Jesus speaking. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in her memory. Now, I don't think that this woman knew that that was what she was doing. Unless she had a better understanding about Jesus' prophecies about his death, which were going straight over the heads of the disciples, I don't think that she was aware that Jesus was soon going to die and be buried. So I think that maybe she was prompted by the Spirit to do this. Now, prior to Pentecost, people didn't have the Holy Spirit in them like we do now. But there are instances in the Old Testament where people are described as being filled with the Spirit for a time. It doesn't specifically say here that this is what's happened, but given that it's a very extraordinary act of worship with a very distinct meaning, I don't think that it happened by chance. I also admire this woman's actions here. I think that it was very courageous of her to do what she did. I can see that there would have been many hold points in the lead up to this event, which she could have talked herself out of following it through to completion. The first hurdle, the expense of the alabaster jar and the sentimental value. The fact that the jar had to be broken to get to its content She couldn't just give a small part. It was all or nothing. This is the first point at which she could have turned about and decided not to go through with this. It was expensive, and she likely did not have the money to spare. The second hurdle. If it was me, I would be worrying about everyone's opinions and second-guessing the whole time. This is a bit of an out there idea. What if there's others there who will criticize me? Which they did. And even worse, what if Jesus thinks this is weird? She could have easily talked herself out of it, but she didn't, and I admire her for her courage. This woman's story is an example to us of true worship. This woman gave her best to Jesus. This action of worshipping God was very different than was the standard worship, but it was accepted by Jesus. Jesus even honoured her by the story being told in her memory. The point I'm trying to make is this. We should worship God how we feel led by the Spirit to worship. True worship of Jesus is costly. It may go against our traditions. It may cause a stir with others. And true worship needs to be intentional. I really like the way that Glen has been trying to encourage us to respond and worship in different ways. I think this is very helpful, especially in church, when worship can become a little formatted sometimes. I grew up in a church which was quite legalistic. It was an independent Baptist church. We had a certain style of worship. We had the same order of service every week. We would sing 4 older hymns, and the second hymn we always sat down for. We had notices, Bible reading, prayer and sermon, all in their same allocated spots, and the sermon was usually over 45 minutes. The ladies wore skirts and dresses. It didn't go as far as head coverings though, and my dad always wore a suit with a tie. It was quite a small church, so if anybody new came, it was really obvious. Occasionally we would have visitors. I remember one time someone came in who lifted their hands when they sang. That was weird to me. Another time a Catholic lady came in and traced the shape of the cross. I grew up very intolerant of worship styles, which were different from what I knew. But I think this story shows the error in this thinking. The style of worship of this lady, to pour a jar of expensive perfume on Jesus' head, is accepted by Jesus. And Jesus goes on to rebuke the disciples who criticize. If it's pleasing and acceptable to Jesus, then who are they to say anything different? I've learned since my younger days the errors in the church that I grew up in. We left that church when I was 15 and joined another church. And when I was at university, I was exposed to different Christian denominations and vastly different styles of worship. So I want to encourage you today. Encourage you to worship Jesus by giving our all, even if others do not understand. And I want to encourage you to be slow to judge the gifts and worship that others bring to God. Now, I hope that you will find this helpful, and we'll spend some time after this reflecting on it too. I've been asking myself this last couple of weeks as I've been preparing this message the following questions. If it was just me and Jesus in person, how would I act and what would I say? If I was going to visit Jesus, how would I prepare? What would I bring? If Jesus was physically here with me, how would I treat others and how would I talk to others? If any of the answers to those questions is different from what we currently do, say, speak, wear, worship, whether in church or outside, then maybe we need to make some changes. Because remember that Jesus is here in spirit. Matthew 18 verse 20, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am with them. So we're going to leave these questions on the screen now. We're going to have a time of reflection and prayer. So if you want to get into small groups or if you want to do this by yourself, that's fine. We're just going to have like 10 minutes or so just to reflect on these questions and pray together. And then I'll come back at the end to close in prayer. I'm just going to close in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for our time of worship and prayer together. Thank you for speaking to us through your word. And thank you for this woman's beautiful act of worship that was told in her memory, that we can learn so much from. I pray, Lord, that you'll be with us as we continue to reflect on what true worship is and what it means to us. Amen.